Welcome back to Buckets and Bibles. So this video's it's kind of just a history of how I came about. There's probably going to be a little bit of testimony on me coming into belief, but it's really probably the precursor of all the heinous shit I've done in my life. So that when you guys experience what's happening in today, you know the difference. You can tell the fruit of change of heart, motives. So let me get going. Grew up my first 11 years with a single parent. My mom left me and two siblings, so 3 kids, with my dad. Just left with her, took off with another dude, and so he was a single parent, and he was a veteran. He got drafted in Vietnam. Ended up not going to Vietnam. They ended up shipping him off to Korea, where he spent some time. My grandfather was World War II veteran. He was an airplane mechanic, and amongst other things, and he'd seen some stuff, been through some stuff. My first memory is me in a diaper pushing the handlebars to a bicycle on the front wheel and forks through the dirt in my diaper, and I think my mom or maybe my dad calling me in. I was pretty young, maybe a year old or something. It's kind of a trip to remember something like that, but it's my first memory. My grandparents, mostly my grandfather, was a real alcoholic, 100%. He worked for PG&E on the West Coast for, I think he did 30 years until he retired. And yeah, he was a good standings at his job. As he got closer to retirement, he wasn't aging good, and he began to drink quite a bit. I would say he always drank a lot, but he started drinking more often, I would say, after he retired. And my dad being a single parent, we spent a lot of time at my grandparents' house, and I know all the single parents out there know what that's like. Having family help is kind of a necessity, because you don't just trust your kids with anybody. And although my grandparents were alcoholics, for the most part of the day they were pretty good to go, especially my grandma. She was an angel, man. She was something else. That lady would have stepped in front of a bullet for any of us kids any day of the week, guarantee it. Probably the nicest, most loving person I'd ever met. Forgiving, just loyal. But grew up around my grandparents a lot. And the reason I was with them a lot is my dad went where the work was, like a lot of men do that are in the trades. He was in underground construction, and he traveled in the summertime wherever the jobs were, which usually not close, and they gave him per diem and stuff like that for being out of town. So summertime, he was gone a lot working out of town, come home on the weekends. And then in the wintertime, he'd get laid off because work was slow, like happens to a lot of the trades. And we'd get on food stamps. Some people call them grub stubs. And I remember they were paper back in the day. We didn't have the little cards. They were paper, and you get to pull them out of this little booklet depending on which bill you wanted to use. And you'd get all these other things too, like a block of government cheese and all this other stuff. I love that cheese. I'd still eat it today. But we were poor, for sure. We never really had, my dad was able to buy a house, and we had this little tiny 3-bedroom house. No air conditioning, no, nothing like that. We had a swamp cooler in the roof that blew kind of cooler air. And given this is not in the south, this is in northern California, like way up in the mountains. So it wasn't humid there, so swamp coolers worked great there. It was very dry. But I remember lots of stuff about that house, and my dad built me a tree fort partially, and a bunch of cool stuff. My dad showing me about bugs and animals, and I remember my grandparents from time to time would take us camping, and they had a little camper, and they'd take us out camping somewhere. Went to a lot of Indian reservations. So it wasn't super terrible. I had an older sister that from about 12 or 13 was a runaway, and at some point had been a runaway and arrested so many times that my dad turned her over to property of the state because he couldn't control her, and he couldn't keep her home. She'd always run away, and he didn't want to like have the repercussions that were coming because he couldn't control her. He had 2 other kids that were much younger that he was trying to help with, and she was adopted. My oldest sister, my dad adopted her. So even though my mom left all 3 kids, the oldest one wasn't even his, and he still looked after her best he could. And so winter time when we were on food stamps, my dad would go to college, and he was trying to get a degree in a bunch of different stuff. He ended up being some kind of scientist or something like that. And later on in life, when he was about 38 or 40, he remarried, and we ended up moving from way up north in a little small town in Northern California to the San Francisco Bay Area, which was a culture shock for me. And it was a lot different than what I was used to. But that's where the work was. That's where the money was. There in the little small towns up north, there was no jobs like what he had offered. And he worked out of Berkeley, California, which is it's a part of the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. And we lived a little bit north of there, and lived there for about 4 or 5 years. And it was pretty much bad almost out of the gate. I think maybe the first year it wasn't too bad. I was 11, and then going into 12 it wasn't too bad, and then from 12 to 13 it started getting kind of bad. There was a lot of different stuff. Tons of kids in this little subdivision we lived in, but a lot of the kids were not mad. It was different back then. I mean, this was in '89 we moved there. So gangs were just getting super popular in California and other states. And what I can remember about all that is that when I showed up to school, I had a camouflage backpack and like hiking boots and like tight Wranglers and a button-up shirt, country looking. And these kids were wearing like starter jackets with the Raiders, and they had Dickie pants and Ben Davis shirts and Nike Cortez, and a lot of them wore Crips and Bloods colors, Northerner and Southerner colors, and it was just different. And we didn't have money like that for all those things. A little bit, but not really. It was better. It was definitely getting better financially, I would say. But my dad remarried a lady who had never had her own kids, and she was a wonderful person. I mean, I'm grateful to have somebody that was a mom that had some kind of moral stuff that taught me some accountability and stuff like that. And at the time, I was an angry kid, man. I wanted my mom, and my mom wasn't around, and I was just mad at the world. And my grandparents, when I spent time with them when I was young, a lot of times at nighttime, my grandfather would be, falling down drunk, crawling down the hallway drunk, 5th of whiskey or 5th of vodka every night. And when people are drinking, you don't always say the nicest things, or do the nicest things. And so, there was a little bit of that. My oldest sister was in and out periodically, and she would leave paraphernalia, like straws and little baggies and stuff like that, that I would find at a, early age, 7, 8 years old. Didn't know what it was. I knew it was bad, but I didn't know what it was. And when I was pretty young, when we lived in that small town, I had gotten, this is going to get a little touchy for some people, but it's part of my story. I'm sharing it with you for a purpose. So there was a couple older teenage kids that, kind of molested me, and it was 2 separate incidents, 2 different people, that thing happened, and I didn't know. I was so young, I didn't know. And for most of it, I kind of played along because I was like, I guess this is just how we play. And it was just those 2 one-time incidents. That was it. There wasn't a lot to it. But those kids they were messed up kids. And I see that now later in life. It took me a long time to forgive them, to where I didn't picture them and want to take them off the planet. But that bottled up inside of me when I heard people talk about different stuff in school. Really, it was really rough, man, because I had all these thoughts that were not like other kids' thoughts, and I didn't know what to do with that, and so I always kind of felt different. And I had learned about drinking alcohol and drugs when I was young, and I wasn't happy. I remember trying to run away when I was about 7 years old, and I did actually run away. I just only made it about a couple miles away in some other neighborhood, and my dad spent the better part of a day looking for me until he finally found me, and whooped my ass pretty bad, which I had it coming. But I wasn't dealing with whatever was going on, and I didn't have a way to process that when I was a kid. I didn't have a healthy out. My family didn't talk about God or Jesus or anything like that. They did allow us to go to church a couple times, with the neighbor kids, because they were like, yeah, these are decent people. Yeah, you can go to church with them or something. If you want to go, it's fine. I think it was just to kind of get us out of the house and have us in a safe place at the same time. But I didn't really hear any good doctrine, a good message. I heard, if you sin, you're going to hell, and there's nothing you can do not to sin. And I'm like, oh, I'm burning. I don't want nothing to do with that God, whatever that is. That's terrible. And I, in the Bay Area, we'll jump back forward. So in the Bay Area, I didn't fit in good, and it didn't take me long to try to start fitting in and dressing like the other people a little bit. And maybe the first 6 or 8 months, the first time I went clothes shopping, my dress code changed, because everybody wore different stuff. We didn't live in a small country town anymore. Now we lived in this big city. And it was just, people just wore different stuff. They were like, team jerseys and just different clothes, and trying to just be like my peers. Of course, I'm dressing like them too, not knowing. I think my first pair of Nikes were red ones, which was not a great idea. Yeah, because that's saying something when you live in the city, in the hood. But my school was definitely in the hood. It was super duper ghetto. Yeah, it was terrible. But we'll jump forward. High school, middle school, I pretty much quit trying. I had a lot of reading. I had a lot of troubles in school with the schoolwork. They said I had a really high IQ, way above average for my age. But I had reading comprehension problems because of the type of dyslexia that I had, and that caused all kinds of problems. I couldn't read and comprehend and keep up with any class from probably about 5th or 6th grade, and it always turned into a behavior issue thing for me. I started acting out, and I was a handful for my parents, for sure. They didn't know. They thought a lot about me. I was just a handful. I got kicked out of almost every school that I'd been to. I'd been either suspended or kicked out of the entire district or expelled out of the district, which was, made it tough for them. I also I got introduced into sports, but not school sports. I was really fond of riding bicycles when I was a kid, and I watched a movie called Rad. If you haven't watched it, go watch it. It's a really good movie. You can find it on YouTube. But I watched this movie Rad, and I was like, man, I want to be like those dudes. And my dad knew that I had a passion for bikes, and he bought me a little cheap race bike, an actual race bike, like name brand. And I was so excited about it. And about 3 weeks later, that bike got stolen, and I was just crushed, man. And he got me another one, and when he was getting me another one, he saw this flyer on the wall about BMX races. And he says, hey, how would you feel about trying this? And he showed me what it was and told me about it, read me the pamphlet, and I said, yeah, let's go check it out. And we went, and I instantly was like, yes, I have to do this. This looks awesome. And it was cool because you start off with beginners, and you start off with kids in your own age group, and it was wonderful. And my dad, trying to be a good dad, trying to keep me out of trouble and give me something positive in my life, diligently, religiously took me to the track every weekend for over 3 years. And I did that again. I did that later on in life for my oldest son. But we'll get to that later. So I raced for a long time, and I was in trouble in school a lot. So I got sent to alternative schools. And the alternative schools, man, were really bad. I mean, it's all the gangbangers, all the kids that are in or out of juvies, kids that don't have parents, that are foster kids. I mean, a lot of troubled kids went to these schools, and drugs and drinking and cigarettes were like just part of the culture. The high school that I went to in the Bay Area, the last one I went to was called Samieto. And it was in Fairfield, California, and it was a trip because the teacher's like, hey, like, we'll let you smoke, but you can't leave campus. Like, you got to stay on the sidewalk outside the gates, and then we'll let it slide. As long as you guys stay in school, we'll let you slide. And it was a trip because he just sit out there smoking cigarettes, talking to the teachers. It was weird. And I was like 15 or 16, and kids would go across the street, hey, get back over here, and the kids would just laugh and flip off the teachers. They go around the corner and smoke some pot or whatever, drink beer, whatever they're doing. We did all that stuff, psychedelics, whatever. It was crazy. It's a different time, and I found that smoking was a good coping skill for me at school because it made me not have the anxiety and all the different stuff that I would have. And so I started at 15, I was maybe 14. I was able to buy beer at the store or cigarettes because I just had a big enough beard, I guess. And so I started at 15 and started smoking a pack a day. And I started doing light drugs. And when I say light drugs, I was drinking a little bit, and I was doing a little bit of pot or some hash or something, just light stuff. Maybe every once in a while I'd touch a psychedelic or something like that, but I wasn't hardcore. And I was fighting with my parents, just awful, always in trouble, always at odds with them. And I think I was about 16, and I had a couple snowboards that I'd collected, and I sold my snowboards and bought a bunch of drugs, some acid, some LSD, and a Greyhound bus ticket, and I left home. And I never went back. So at 16, I was pretty much on my own, and I ran amok. I lived with my grandparents for a little while. I lived on the streets. I did a lot of couch surfing, and that lasted about 3 years. And sometime in those 3 years, I ended up getting into really, really hard drugs like methamphetamine and cocaine and pills and stuff like that. And life took a real bad turn for the worse. And I think when I pivoted, I had a couple really bad dudes hunting me down with assault rifles because I'd burned them. I'd burned all the bridges with my family. Nobody wanted anything to do with me. I just went way left, and everybody was like, nope, that's it. And my dad came and he offered me a solution, and I didn't want it. I didn't want the solution. He's like, hey man, how about if you go to rehab? I'll pay for it. I'll get you in. And so I surrendered after about 4 hours of yelling and crying and saying, I'm not going to go. I surrendered. I said, okay, I'll go. And I went to a really fancy place, a little 28-day ring drive place that was really, it was in the upper part, like rich area of the Bay Area. And I went to that, and I was there for about 10 days, and I got kicked out with a no refund, which was bad for pops. And that was in 90, probably like in 97 and 1997. Yeah, I think it was in March of 1997. And I got kicked out, and they were supposed to just drop me off at the closest store when they kicked me out, and they took me to some church, and I sat at this Catholic church, and I knew if I left what I was going to do, because I saw right down the street there was a liquor store, and I'm 19 years old, and I'm like, man, I'm like, I've already wrecked my life, and I just don't want to wreck it anymore. And so I stayed at this church and ended up getting into another place that was really cheap. And I mean, it was the opposite spectrum of where I just came from. It was super low class, like $500 a month rehab type of thing. And I stayed there for 7 months. I stayed there until they said, it's okay for you to go, but we don't know if you'll stay sober, but we know if you mess up, you know what to do. And that's what I did. I got out, and I tried going and getting a job, and I didn't have any luck with that. And my mom had popped up somewhere along the scene during all that, and so I'd started having a relationship with her a little bit, which was really weird because I've got my pretty straight edge dad, college graduate, regular, sports, soccer mom kind of thing, family. And then I had my mom, which was all the way outlaw, drug dealers, driving Lamborghinis and growing pot plants in her bedroom, and like a lot, just way different, drunk all the time, going to the bar fights, big biker rings, motorcycles in the garage, outlaws coming over late at night. Just a whole different thing. Just a total different walk of life. They'd do crimes in one state and then move to another state so they didn't have to go to jail. It was just different. And my mom had another kid, so I had a little brother, and me and him had gotten close, and so they had moved to Texas from California, and then Oregon, and then they went to Texas. And when I was out of that rehab, my mom said, hey, why don't you come out here? And she was doing really good at this time. It's probably the best time she was doing her whole life. She was like a manager, and she says, hey, come out here, I'll give you a job, and you can give this a shot. And I said, okay. And so I jumped on a Greyhound and went out to Texas from California, and fell in love with Texas. Man, Texas was cool. And I got out there in 1998, and so I was in Texas for Y2K, which was a trip. But I was not done ripping and running. It took me just a couple months of being in Texas, and my little ghetto ass was already in a high-speed chase with the cops, got away on foot, got picked up later. I mean, just instantly up to no good, and it just got worse and worse and worse. And I had brief times where I was sober for maybe a year or so, or a few months, or 6 months, or a month or two. But I always kind of just had one foot back in that world, and it got really, really dark, And I ended up leaving Texas after about 5 years. Got to Arizona, stayed there for a little while, kind of the same thing. I moved for a little bit, geographical fix, and it only lasts temporarily. And I didn't really know there was another way to live, except for that when I went to meetings and I got sober a couple times, I knew there was hope for me to live a different way, but I hadn't figured out that yet. I ended up going, I left Phoenix because same thing. I'm running around with guns in the car, going to rob connects and stuff, and that happened a bunch of times. And I'd been to jail a whole bunch of times already, and no prison sentences or anything, just a bunch of jail, county time or city time. And I left. I didn't stay in the same spot a lot. I bounced around like a gypsy, and I think that's one of the reasons I didn't do any hard time really. So I ended up going from, when I was in Arizona, I was just outside of Phoenix, and I found out that I had a kid that I didn't know about, and he was like 3. And so I drove up to San Francisco and went and saw this kid, and I thought, man, there's no way that's my kid. He's got blue eyes and blonde hair, and that's probably not my kid. And I got a DNA test done, and so a couple months later, I had moved to back to California, and then I got the DNA test, and they said, yeah, that's your kid. And I instantly went and picked him up, and I was sober briefly, and because geographical, right? So like you little fresh start, it's easy to get cleaned up, and for a while until life starts happening, and then you turn back to the comfortably numb, if you would. And when I grew up in the hood. I didn't really let my folks raise me. I mean, they tried, but I didn't really let them raise me. I learned street stuff and street smarts, and it's a different type of lifestyle, and I never could relate to them after I went that route, because they were more like regular folks, and I wasn't. I changed everything changed. And I started getting shot at when I was like, I think I got shot out when I was 7 in a small town with like a BB gun or something. Some kids were chasing and shoot at. That's kid stuff, right? But I started getting shot at with actual firearms when I was 14 or 15. When I was in the hood out nighttime doing dumb shit, and little Impala pulls up, primered out little Impala pulls up, and they start, what set you claiming, homie? And seeing us wearing dark blue, and that's all it took, and they just started busting caps, shooting at us. And the first one I thought hit one of us, because there was 3 of us, and I thought the first shot hit one of us, and we all got low and started running. We were right on a sidewalk right by a wooden fence, and we started running down this wooden fence that seemed like it went on forever. It was probably 100 feet, and we started running, and as this he was pulling the trigger, just shooting at us, you could hear the bullets just hitting right behind us. You could hear them boom, clap, boom, clap, boom, clap. And so every time you'd hear the trigger, you'd wait for it to hit the fence as you were running. And we were booking fast as we can to get around the corner and get out of sight, And I think they probably had a revolver, because I think it was 6 or 8 shots, and then they sped off, and they didn't get us, but that was just like, no, that was crazy, man. And then just right back to it like nothing happened. Like I said, my moral compass was backwards. It really was. And shoot, man, I guess from there, man, when I found out I had a kid, I tried to go to school. I went to security school, became like a private investigator, and got into executive protection, and got my guard card so I could go be a prison guard and all this different stuff. I did a lot of cool stuff at that school, but it was short-lived. I think about maybe less than 2 years later, I'd ended up losing my guard card, and all those rights that I had got revoked. So, but it was cool. I got some experience, and something happened. And about a year after moving back to California, I just lonely, depressed, not quite. Something was never right, and a lot of that had to do with spiritual warfare. I didn't have any good grounding. Well, when I was 21, I'm about 26 at this point. When I was 21, I had a spiritual experience. I believed that there was some kind of God, like good order election, like a spirit of the universe, or something like Native Americans believe, like there was a creator, right? But I didn't have a face or a rule book or anything like that, and I didn't want anything to do with like church stuff. It was like, it wasn't for me. But I had went to church with a buddy of mine, and and I had a burning bush moment, and the Father and Yeshua showed up, and they were like, "Hey, look, like, we've been here the whole time. We know exactly where you're at. We know where you've been through, and we love you." And it changed my prejudice towards that. Like, now the Creator, now the Father had a face, and I had a Redeemer. I just didn't know about that. I didn't know how it worked, and I was immediately put on some false doctrine of modern day Christianity that wasn't really scriptural. It was man's theory on what the Bible meant and said versus just what it said. And man, I fell off the wagon hard. I went instantly, like, I hit the ground running and ended up in really bad ghetto hood area doing a bunch of ghetto stuff, running around with a bunch of ghetto people, and I had done so much terrible things over the years, man, and I was at the point where I had given up. I said, I'm never going to get it. I'm just going to run it out until I die. And I knew, like, any day I could die because of how I ran and who I ran with. And I almost got killed a couple times by some guys, but for whatever reason I didn't die yet. And I got myself in some trouble, and I got picked up by the cops, and I wouldn't say that I was arrested. I would say that I was rescued. I really was. I was rescued because they did for me what I couldn't do for myself. They got me out of that mess, and they put me somewhere where I could get cleaned up, and gave me some little time out, a little alone time. And so I got cuffed up, and it took me about 2 weeks to quit trying to get out of jail and con people out of getting me out, until I finally surrendered. And I sat there for about 2.5 months, maybe like I don't know, maybe like 80 days or something like that. And that's a long time, especially when you don't know if you're getting out or not. You don't know when you're getting out. You don't know if you're going to go to prison, if you're going to be there for years or not. And it gives you a different mindset if you've ever, done something and you're like, dang, so I wouldn't recommend any of the stuff that I was doing at all. But, life happens sometimes. You get in bad situations, and sometimes there's a harder learning curve for some of us than others. And this is just my story. I'm really putting it all out there for you guys, just so you know. This isn't easy to talk about. There's a purpose for my talk, though. So I went, sat there in jail for a while. They let me out. They let me go to like a transitional living, like rehab thing, and I did that for about 9 months, and ended up getting another girl pregnant, and didn't know about it for a while, and didn't really, at this point I was barely getting to see my oldest, my son. He's about 23 now, fixing to be 23, and I had a daughter, and the mom was like, yeah, I don't want you to see her. And I was like, man, that was rough. And I didn't know how to fight or what to do. I'd already had most of my rights taken away. I just thought it was another one of those. And yeah, it was tough, man. It was like that just heart, like, man, and that just powerless. Like, there was nothing I could do, nothing I knew how to do. I didn't have any skills. I didn't know, I didn't have any money. I didn't have any career. I had nothing. And I was just starting to get clean. And when I was sitting in jail, this miracle happened. And I didn't know quite what it was, but I knew something had changed. Something had changed, not by my doing, though. And they were making wine hooch, little jail wine in there, and it starts stinking really bad because it's fermenting and it causes a gas to come out. And they do it in these big old plastic bags, and they call burping it, and you have to open it up and let the gas out every once in a while. Well, they move it from cell to cell as much as they can, because if you leave it in one cell too long, the cops could just zero in on it really right away, the guards. And it happened to be in my cell, and it was my birthday, which is New Year's Eve. And they were drinking this hooch. My bunkie was talking to this dude, because we're we're locked up 23 hours a day. They only let you out for 1 hour a day to go to get a shower, and that's it. Maybe a little rec time if you can get out to the yard, but basically you just sat in your cell all day, working out or reading or whatever, writing letters, whatever you're into. And they were talking all this gangster crap at the door about how when they get out they're gonna do this and that, and just all this hood rat gangster shit that normally I would have been all, hell yeah, me too. But something happened, and right then I heard everything they were saying, and they were drinking, and I saw the lifestyle. I saw it for what it was for this first time my whole life, and I was like, man, these dudes are coming right back here. When they get out, they're coming right back. And the guy turned around right in that moment when I was realizing that, and he goes, hey, Wood, you want a drink? And I was like, man, I really don't. I'm good. I'm good off of all that shit. And something changed. And I knew I had something. And so when I was in there, I wrote some letters, made some moves, had a dude come visit me that was clean and sober, that was a good guy. And he kind of showed me how to get up in the morning and go do something, how to hustle and make money. Not almost like streetways, but not really. So it was a really good transition for me because I was not employable. So if you got family members that have been out there running a month, putting a needle in their arm or drinking or pills, it may take a little while for them to come back to reality. I was unemployable for over a year. Not for a regular job. I was too unpredictable. I was too emotional roller coaster because the ride hadn't stopped yet. And although I had a change of heart and I wanted something different for myself and I was fighting for it, I still didn't know how to act right. I just didn't know how to act right. I had turned myself into an animal by the style of living that I chose. And the Father was kind of bringing me back. And fishing's a big part of how that started coming back around. I started to learn how to fish and be quiet and sit, be still in my own skin and be patient, and getting up early in the morning and going to the water before the sun gets up. I learned a lot of little skills that taught me that I could do more with myself than what I thought I could. And I'm 29, maybe just turning 30, and I'd never had a job for more than a few months. I didn't have any skills. I was a high school dropout. I could barely read. I mean, barely. I could barely read what the applications were asking me when I'd fill them out sometimes. I could barely read. And I still don't read that good. I do a lot of audible books, but that's just how I learn. And I'm in my mid to late 40s, and I've gotten by okay. So it's not a must. It helps though a lot. I know I could do a lot more if I could read good. Just an obstacle that I have for me. It is what it is. There's not a way around it. The type of dyslexia it is, there's no cookie cutter solution or practice you can do for it. All of the things that have been suggested to try to build up, I do, and they've only brought me so far. I could still read a sentence or a paragraph, and something in my brain switches, and I no longer understand what it's saying. It doesn't make sense. Even if I start to read it out loud, I fumble through the words so hard that none of it computes. And so I'm unable to get information that way. I have to do it audibly or visually, see something work for me to get it. But here I am not really having any skill set, no real life experience in the working man, being self-supported, because up to this point, I hustled my way, through life. I mean, if you had $100 and it's all you had, I could talk you out of it. And if I couldn't talk you out of it, I'd steal it. And if I couldn't steal it, I'd rob you for it, at knife point or gun point. And I was just that. I was one of those dudes. If I wanted something and you had it, I was going to get it one way or another. And I didn't care. I didn't have any value on human life. So if I hurt you in that, it didn't matter to me, because my moral compass was backwards. And that's some real evil stuff. But I'm gonna tell you right now, that was nothing compared to how really evil people are out there. There's some real bad guys out there on the planet, real bad. just yucky people. But anyhow, so I ended up bullshitting my way onto a job, painting. I told this dude I had some painting experience. He's all cool, and he was just getting back into contracting, and so he took me with him because he didn't have any other guys, and he knew instantly I didn't know what the hell I was doing, and but he stuck it out with me, and he taught me and had patience, and he let me stay, and he kind of paid it forward. Maybe the same thing happened for him, and he taught me some skilled trade stuff and taught me how to paint and do carpentry and a bunch of other cool stuff. And at about a year, I was like, hey, come look at my work. I want you to check it. It's immaculate. And because I never said that. And he goes, it's about time. And after that job, he fired me. And I didn't understand why. I was like, I'm finally so good that you don't have to like look at my stuff anymore. And he goes, I know. Now go make a living for yourself. And it broke my heart to get fired because I felt like I'd been so loyal and he'd been so good to me. I loved him and I wanted to stay, but he knew I would have rode his coattail and been loyal and stayed there, and he knew that I could do more. And he forced me to go make a living for myself. He forced me to get out there and figure it out, and I had all the tools that I needed to go start a business for myself, and that's what I did. So at about 31, going into 32, I started my own business. And it was tough. I underbid stuff, I messed stuff up, I worked for free sometimes because I didn't bid stuff right, and I learned the hard way, but I learned, and I got good, and I met a lot of contractors, and I kept getting work, and I kept showing up, I kept doing it, and doing a good job, doing the best I could, and I ended up, after a while, I ended up getting a lot of clientele and referral work, and I had a really successful business after about 7 years. And it was fire. It was great. I was getting multiple calls all week, just like, hey, I don't know. I was blessed. When I first started, it was just me, maybe a helper sometimes, and then it got to a certain point where I had about 4 dudes working for me year round, and I think that was saying something, all things considered. And I moved us from super duper ghetto, like renting a room from somebody in the hood, to having a okay apartment, to having us a nice apartment. And then we finally got a house, like a house with a backyard and stuff, and a driveway and a garage, which is super epic when you live in the city, which was really expensive. And this was, I don't know, freaking 5 or 7 years ago, and maybe more than that, maybe 15 years ago, something like that. It was a long time ago. And but I had a good job, I had a good career, and somewhere along the lines I fell off the wagon for a little bit. I met my wife. My wife was an exotic dancer. I'll spare you all that and let her tell her story on a different time. She's got a YouTube channel, check it out. It's called Loud Presence. And if you know my wife, you know why. But go check her out. She's got a testimony on there. I don't know if she talks about too much of that, but I'll let her tell that part of it. But she was it. And I dated tons of girls that would have qualified, but I said, the next girl I get with, I'm going to stay. No matter what, I'm going to stay. And I stayed with her. And beautiful story. I was still super duper outlaw, not quite where I am today. Actually, a long ways from where I am today. I was way better than I had been, but I wasn't where I am today. And I hope that, in 10 years from now, I can say the same thing. This video's going long. I got introduced to my wife. We ended up hooking up and started dating, and we ended up getting married a year after we started dating, and then 6 months after that we had our first kid, and then we had 2 more after that. Well, 3 more after that, but one of them was a stillborn. That's another part of the story. That's for a different time. But we've been together for 11 years, and I'm happy and blessed, and You know, she's a lot younger than me, but she keeps me young, and I'm like a big ass kid anyhow, so it's good. She reads super good, but she ain't got no street smarts, and I can't read, but I got all the street smarts, and so we're a pretty good pair. I think the father knew what he was doing on all that one. She's a softie to a degree, and I'm not, so everything has got a pretty good balance with us. And 5 years after being married, she had an experience where she knew that the biblical God was real and the Messiah was real, and things started to change in our relationship, and it's just gotten better ever since. We fought tooth and nail to get out of the hood and even get out of the state of California, moved to Oregon, had a beautiful house in the suburbs, 3-bedroom, 2-car garage, 2-bath, beautiful yard, everything, almost everything you could want, we had it. California king bed, we had leather furniture, big screen, surround sound, we had a boat in the garage, every tool I could have, 2 really super nice finance vehicles. I mean, the kids had all the power wheels. I mean, everything. We had everything we could have wanted, we had. And we sold all that crap in one weekend, bought a 5th wheel camper, and started traveling the country trying to follow the Father and His will. And that was about 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago. Yeah, I think 6 years ago. And we've been keeping Torah for about 4. We do the whole Bible. We don't pick and choose. And I think for us, once you know this, once you come from regular Christianity and then you see the other part of the story that you were misinformed on, or that the whole picture wasn't painted, or all the information wasn't just cherry picked and delivered. There wasn't a doctrine built off just a couple verses, and you can see the Bible in its entirety. It's not hard for us to see that if you believe in Yeshua, the Messiah, Jesus, if you believe in Him, He wasn't a lawless Messiah. He kept the law, and He wouldn't tell people to break the law, because breaking the law, according to the scriptures, is what sin is. The definition of sin hasn't changed from the beginning of time till now. The Father says, do this and don't do this. So much so that it's written down for us, because He knows we're dummies, and that we're going to forget, and that we need to double check and make sure, what does it actually say? And so that's it, guys. It's a long video, but I felt like a lot of people should know like where I came from, and I didn't get too deep into the weeds on a lot of that stuff, because there's a lot of terrible stories, a lot of crap that you don't need to know. But I gave you from an early age, kind of how I came up into what evolved me, and then where that went from there on to the next, until how I got to today. And so the rest of the videos, I've got testimony videos coming to the way part 2, my understanding of the scriptures, and then I've got Friday night lives that we do 7:30 Central Time. We'll get on here and we will fellowship, and we will talk about scriptures, and probably other stuff too. But if you guys like this video, hit me in the chat. I appreciate you guys. Thanks for tuning in.